on tonight because you care about the temple in a particularly strong way. It's connected to you, and uh, it's connected to you strongly, and you to it. You just, it is this, it's all about relationship and that incredibly difficult but necessary question to ask, which is, like, what are we doing here? You know, like, what is this all about? And I know on a certain level, the the answer is secondary to the sense of obligation and love and loyalty. With those kinds of feelings, you know, that's why we're here, right? Because we care. We are right now living in the midst of one of the most extraordinary transitions uh, of our country, and we have been through so many. This is an extraordinary transition, and I think there's a lot to learn watching how people handle this transition and how it computes, how we understand what the past means and the future that we want and how we get there. And we are really thinking about the same things. You know, there's this, so the great 20th century scholar of Jewish mysticism, Gershon Sholem, talked about three ways of understanding through Jewish mystical eyes what's going to happen next. And for some, it was a restorative vision. What those mystics wanted was that everything was going to be the way it was in an ideal state, like basically a utopian vision. Is a vision where everything is destroyed, right? Where there is a huge conflagration, and then what arises is a something new and perfect. And then the third thing was this notion that history ends and we are an eternal present. Each one of those visions we can then take and apply to how we understand our present and future right now. But I would say one of the dangerous traps inherent in each of these visions, certainly in the restorative vision, is to assume that what we knew is enough to cover what we don't know now and how we'll deal with the future. I don't know about you, I mean, everyone has a really unique vantage point. Each one of you in your own beautiful rectangle has your own experience and your own juggling act. And some of you juggle with flames and fire, some of you with chainsaws, some of you with babies. Whatever you're juggling, you're doing it, and you're doing it a lot. And in order to be whole, to have been able enough at 7:07 p.m. to know which button to push to get on Zoom, which button to push to mute, you know, that's already something, you know, that really is. It's already a major statement about how we've gotten to this moment. But the truth is, with all these tools that we've gained, we look towards the future and we know that so much of what we learned is not going to be helpful. That to say we're going to lean back on what we had is to suppose that somehow it's informative of what we're going to make. And I think history is a valuable aspect of Jewish culture. We understand who we are as part of a continuum of experience and peoplehood. And without that, we don't have a core. But it's not enough just to be contemplative and say, here, I have this. I'm looking for eternal presence and oneness. It doesn't work for a community. For our community, it's about each other. It's about us. It's about a totality. And look, it's not as if we haven't had to do transitional work for it. I mean, Becky asked me to think about some examples of major transitions that we've made. And so I was thinking one of them was the transition of our temple and the music that we listen to, the music that's part of our sanctuary. 25 years ago, we had an organ and we had a soloist who was a soprano with operatic training. That was a different world of sacred experience. And now we're in a place where there's Debbie Friedman and post Debbie Friedman. There's jazz, there's drums, things that never could have been imagined. And I will tell you, one of the reasons we were able to make that transition, which I think was a historical necessity, but that's a whole different story. We made this transition, and I would say because our temple is unusually ready to say, what the hell, let's give it a shot. And that attitude permeates so much of who we are and what we do. Extraordinary, but we made that. There are congregations, and that would be able to tell you, there are congregations still arguing whether to use the prayer book Mishkan Tefillah or Gates of Prayer, which was a transition we also went through, but we didn't have a year's worth of commentary and study groups. The congregation said, all right, let's look at it. Let's give it a shot. That willingness to stretch is unusual. And I think it's one of our most, if not the most valuable part of our institutional DNA. The second thing I was thinking about was 25 years ago, the congregation was not particularly interested in the UR. If there was a biennial, maybe Rabbi Miller went. Maybe 2 people went, but this wasn't considered particularly relevant. And now, I don't remember the last biennial. I don't remember how many of us there were, but there were a lot of us from Temple Beth Avodah because we realized that our totality is not just within our building, that we have to transition to see ourselves as part of a larger whole. We're part of a movement or a form movement and all that means and all we can learn from it. It was a big transition for us to go from, look, what was our nickname? So now we're the temple where the lights are always on, the doors always open. 25 years ago and before that, as Michelle, Lauren, Jennifer, so other people could tell you, it was called the Temple in the Woods. And that wasn't just a geographic location. It was tucked away, and the congregation liked being tucked away, liked being just a half a step removed. There wasn't a competition with Temple Shalom or maybe a little bit with Temple Emmanuel, but it wasn't about, we were our own thing and had it, and you didn't know where we were unless someone gave you directions. You could go down that dirt road. I mean, there's a dirt road there? Yeah, and there's a synagogue. That's a major transition for us, right? To go from a rather cloistered, inward-looking, but I'm not critiquing that. That's who we were. And we became very successful in that modality of thinking. But from there, from the moment that they paved it to the time that we have now, this beautiful building that some of you still haven't been in since we did the reconstruction and the refurbishment, and I will tell you, it's gorgeous, and the day will come. But in all of those, and there's so many more, which I won't go into because I realize I'm very close to my time, if not over. But the fact was, we looked at the situation and we said, got to move forward. Let's do it with vision. Let's do it with a sense of family, and let's do it with a sense of moving forward. It's about innovation. It's about, I would say, even more than the word evolution, it's about innovation. It's about creating something new. It's about looking and daring to think outside the box, because I will tell you, one more quick transition. If you had told me 2 years ago that High Holy Days would be an experience that you had looking at a screen, I would have said, as I did in April and May and the beginning of June, there's no way. We just can't do it. How is that possible? But we had to, right? It was innovation time. And it changed about 100 times between the first time we realized we had to do it and to the time where we actually began the video. And we did it in our way, in our style. We didn't have a whole lot to lean back on. We had nothing to, who knew about video production? But we made it work. I'd like to suggest that attitude, we can make it work, is part of a willingness, a daring to think about what post-COVID looks like. I heard today on NPR a paid spot by a lawyer, Margulies, and somebody who is doing consulting on post-COVID office management. I was thinking, they're so smart. They're so smart. And that's where we have to go, in that we have to be so smart right now. I think that we have to take all of our love and our dedication and find an opportunity to dare to say, what could it be? And we need all of you, your energy, your thought, your dedication to make that work. Our co-chairs, who on my screen have to be right next to each other. How perfect. Carolyn Snyder, Nikki Baumer, two really extraordinary women who bring expertise and thoughtfulness and, again, and love of Temple Beth Avodah. Carolyn brings it from her youth into this very moment. Nikki, a more recent member of the temple, but someone who is all. So I want to thank you all for coming here. And we're lucky to also be learning to have these two co-chairs, to have Becky's always a present stellar superlative abilities to help us get where we want to go. And of course, we're all lucky to be sitting at the feet of Annette Friedman, who has been working with us for some years now as a consultant, but I would really have to say, most of all, as a friend of our congregation who cares about this institution and what it means. And lest I forget, the other person I'd like to mention, part of this endeavor is, of course, our incoming president, Carol Rodenstein, okay, mea culpa, but I'm getting it. I promise I'll get it in time. But anyway, Carol, of course, thank you for your leadership now and moving forward, since you're going to be deep in innovation. So thanks everyone for being here. Thanks for responding, for coming, and for sharing your heart and your mind with this endeavor. It's our future, you know. It really is. It really is Atideynu. It really is our future that we are entrusted to shape. Nanette.
I think I'm going to Carolyn next.
I think I'm going to go now. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Rabbi. Thank you so much. Nikki and I are excited to lead this new program and to think about what it is that TBA needs from its leaders in our current and our future world. Before we get started, though, with Nanette, let's get to know each other better. Take a moment to reflect on ourselves. In a moment, Becky is going to play a short video. As you're watching the video, pay attention to what is needed from each individual portrayed for the group's success. Becky, you want to show? Can you share your screen?
If you've learned a lot about leadership and making a movement, then let's watch a movement happen start to finish in under 3 minutes and dissect some lessons. First, of course, a leader needs the guts to stand alone and look ridiculous. But what he's doing is so simple, it's almost instructional. This is key. You must be easy to follow. Now here comes the first follower with a crucial role. He publicly shows everyone else how to follow. Notice how the leader embraces him as an equal. So it's not about the leader anymore. It's about them, plural. Notice how he's calling to his friends to join in. See, it takes guts to be a first follower. You stand out and you brave ridicule yourself. Being a first follower is an underappreciated form of leadership. The first follower transforms a lone nut into a leader. If the leader is the flint, the first follower is the spark that really makes the fire. Now here's the second follower. This is a turning point. It's proof the first has done well. Now it's not a lone nut and it's not two nuts. 3 is a crowd and a crowd is news. A movement must be public. Make sure outsiders see more than just the leader. Everyone needs to see the followers because new followers emulate followers, not the leader. Now here come 2 more people, then 3 more immediately. Now we've got momentum. This is the tipping point, and now we have a movement. As more people jump in, it's no longer risky. If they were on the fence before, there's no reason not to join in now. They won't stand out, they won't be ridiculed, and they will be part of the in crowd if they hurry. And over the next minute you'll see the rest who prefer to stay part of the crowd, because eventually they'd be ridiculed for not joining. And ladies and gentlemen, that is how a movement is made. So let's recap what we've learned. If you are a version of the shirtless dancing guy, all alone, remember the importance of nurturing your first few followers as equals, making everything clearly about the movement, not you. Be public, be easy to follow. But the biggest lesson here, did you catch it? Leadership is over-glorified. Yes, it started with the shirtless guy, and he'll get all the credit, but you saw what really happened. It was the first follower that transformed a lone nut into a leader. There's no movement without the first follower. See, we're told that we all need to be leaders, but that would be really ineffective. The best way to make a movement, if you really care, is to courageously follow and show others how to follow. When you find a lone nut doing something great, have the guts to be the first person to stand up and join in.
Sorry, I think I was muted. Am I unmuted now? I don't know what you guys thought, but that whole video makes me giggle, but it actually makes me really understand. I know where I would fit into that, but we're going to put you all into breakout rooms now for just a few minutes. Introduce yourselves to the others in the room. Share who you might identify with in that video. Becky, you're up.
Yep, so I'm putting you in breakout rooms, and we'll give you a few minutes and we'll send you a warning when it's time to come back.
So I hope everyone liked their group as much as we did. We got to know each other and we all talked about who we were in the video. We were all the same, so it was kind of interesting. So it was really very fun. I hope you guys all enjoyed it. The goals of this new Haneni called Atideynu, the goals of what we're doing now are not only to develop those leadership skills and think about challenges for Temple, but also to build the community and relationships with each other. Each of the roles in the video are necessary to move us towards innovation and success. And that's why you're all here. You care about TVA, and we so appreciate your involvement and your thoughts. I'd like to introduce you now to Nanette Friedman, our guest facilitator for tonight. She has worked with us in the past on governance, fundraising, and other areas at Temple. Tonight, she will be framing some tools for innovative thinking in the context of synagogue life. Nanette?
Thank you so much, and thanks for inviting me into this new group. It's very exciting, and I really love the topic. I think it is a special time, and this notion of innovation by design for thought leaders like yourselves and leaders in the congregation, new and seasoned. It's very, very exciting. So I'm going to share my screen with you, just so no one needs to take a note. We can send this out after, but just because some people are visual learners and some people are audio learners, this way we'll have a record of our conversation, so to speak. Yeah, so look, What I want to talk about in our brief time tonight is how TBA has innovated before and during COVID, building on what the rabbi said and what we've learned from it. I want to share a framework with you for innovative thinking and explore how to encourage and apply innovative thinking by thought leaders like yourself moving forward. So those are the goals for our brief time together this evening. And I want to start by saying that I have the privilege of working with nonprofit organizations around the country and my fair share of synagogues. And I feel that I can say with confidence that synagogues are resistant to change. With what Rabbi Stern said aside, that's wonderful that TBA has had that flexibility in their thinking. But in general, there's been a lot of resistance, and we've always done it that way is a very popular refrain. The quote, the most dangerous phrase in the English language, we've always done it that way. I believe that's true. And so we have to fight against that general inclination, right, to hold on to doing things the way we do it, or the notion in this case of returning to the way we did things. This cartoon is so funny, right? Because it's true, right? Because a lot of times we don't want to risk something. We want to continue to play it safe. And by playing it safe, we start to see a decline. And this is typical, you know, we fight against this in the workplace, nonprofits fight against this, and synagogues fight against this. But it doesn't have to be this way. And that's what's so exciting. One of the things, hold on one second while I don't know what that was, but we'll come back. Okay. One of the things that has happened, I've been talking about before COVID, which I am affectionately referring to now as BC, soon hoping to be PC, post-COVID. But if we think about, you know, innovation before COVID, there was always this aspiration to be creative and innovative with some success. So TBA pre-COVID innovation includes educational programs with technology and trips, you know, interest-based responsive programming that you've been able to start, the way you've approached fundraising, new staff positions, and new governance models, in addition to what Rabbi Stern shared about the music and other examples. So certainly TBA has had success with innovation. In other common synagogue innovation before COVID, we were looking at collaboration with other organizations, whether it's co-sponsoring or, you know, partnering in deeper ways, and changes in membership dues, which I'm sure you've heard a bunch about. Then we had coronavirus. Probably you will not want to see this picture again. Many of this people have been seeing this for the CDC. And the question is, what happened? Well, what happened is that organizations like synagogues in general, who were resistant in some cases to innovation, had to innovate what I refer to as innovation by necessity. And so that muscle got flexed, and that here we are, and look at all the ways that TBA has innovated during COVID. So Becky, do you want to talk a little bit to these successes that you've had?
Yeah, so I am sure, looking at the people on this call, that everyone on this call has experienced at least sort of one of these innovations in the past 10 months, but we thought it might be helpful just to give you a fuller sense of all of the ways that we have innovated during this time. So the most obvious one being, we actually put it as Friday night services, but I'm going to add high holidays into that as well, and how we pivot to virtual services. And over the course of the past 10 months, we've had, I would say, anywhere from 50 to 100 households on Shabbat on a regular basis. Right now, we're sitting comfortably in the 70s range, I think. So clearly, that innovation has not only, I would say, been a solution to kind of bring us to where we were pre-COVID, but actually never would we have that many people consistently coming to Shabbat in the sanctuary. So that has certainly been a success. A big challenge is religious school in terms of everybody's comfort levels with being in person or not being in person, how big are the groups, what are the safety concerns, but also, my kid can't handle another Zoom session, and I don't know what to do, or, we can't do it on that day anymore because now it's Wednesdays instead of Tuesdays, whatever it is. And, one of the things we decided early on was to be as flexible as we possibly could and provide as many choices as we could, obviously with safety in mind. There's been various levels of restrictions on our in-person programming. Over the warmer months, we did a lot of outdoor events. And as we've moved into this colder time and where it's not as safe to gather in person, we're doing more Zoom programming. And I would put in there thinking about asynchronous programming, like the podcasts that have been coming out that have had a huge success rate, reaching far more people than a Sunday morning talk might reach. One I think that many of us can identify with is the feeling of being isolated, whether that's physically or emotionally. And, as I think you all know, we've done some rounds of outreach calls to the congregation. We sent Hanukkah cards, which we got some wonderful responses from people about getting a card from a fellow congregant. And we also, on an ongoing basis, are kind of keeping an eye on people who we know are more at risk, particularly our elder population, and making sure that we're staying connected with them, because we know, staying connected technologically is a harder endeavor for them. Financially, there were a lot of unknowns going into this time. Are people going to rejoin? If they do rejoin, how much financial help do they need this year? Maybe they lost their jobs or have increased expenses because their kids aren't in school full time, whatever it is. We knew it was going to look different. And with a lot of help from Nanette, we were able to think about what are different scenarios that we need to come up with so that we were prepared once we saw which path it was going down. In addition to that, as many of you know, our annual sustaining campaign, we doubled the amount we typically raise this year to make up for some of the losses and from people needing additional financial help this year that they haven't needed in the past. And that way, being able to include everybody in TBA who would like to be a part of it. Governance and the way that our leadership works, everything was dependent on coming in person to a meeting. And that obviously has not happened, and been able to quickly pivot to virtual meetings and adding things like the Health and Safety Task Force, or things that responding to the needs of the congregation in real time. And the last piece around staffing and the realization that the way our staff was set up was for a different set of needs in the community, and really thinking about what is it that's needed right now and how can we flex and change our staffing in order to be responsive to those needs. So, everything in this sort of innovation during the time of COVID is about being responsive, and that change and innovation was necessary because of COVID, and to think responsively about what we were going to do about it.
Great. Thanks so much, Becky. So you can see, lots to be proud of here for how, and this word is probably banned for many of you, pivoted and innovated during this time. But for me, what this shows us is really a silver lining, because what it means is that we've all flexed these innovative muscles and used this innovative thinking, because I have to tell you that the truth is we aren't going back to normal. And post-COVID is going to be filled with its own challenges. Health concerns will remain. We have to make up perhaps for loss of education and formative experiences. Taste and preferences will change. And not to be the bearer of bad news, but synagogues and religious organizations faced serious challenges pre-COVID. And, in terms of, what some of those were, without really going into them in depth right now, there are shifting demographics, increasing competition for philanthropic dollars, growing sophistication of consumers and donors, new generations coming of age, millennials and post, who have their own different ideas about organizational belonging and how they experience religious practice, decreasing organizational loyalty, more focus on services that are a la carte, changing notion of membership and belonging for the general population, and aging or under-resourced technology and buildings. Although, of course, you have a beautiful building to come back to, which is amazing. But these things are true, and additional challenges exist. So what's my point here? My point is that the challenges we face are going to continue. They were here before, whether we talked about them or not, and they were at the forefront. And the news is that the rate of change is increasing. Things are happening very quickly. So we have to get into a way of how are we going to, as Becky said, address challenges, come up with solutions, and adapt in real time. And how can we do that with what we've learned through this innovation by necessity? So a couple of questions that I just want to open up, ideas that perhaps people have thought about in their own lives outside of the temple or vis-a-vis the temple. How can we resist the notion of back to normal? And how can we continue to cultivate innovative thinking by design, not by necessity? And how can we continue to be creative and nimble? Are there ideas that people have that they've seen or put into practice or are thinking about as you think about returning and what things might look like after this for that we can incorporate for TBA? Because I think that this new way of thinking of intentionally being innovative is really directionally the way to go. And especially when we think about having thought leaders such as yourselves help to tackle the challenges and some opportunities that lie ahead as well. I just want to open it up for discussion. People have ideas about how to continue to cultivate this thinking and how to continue to be creative and nimble that you maybe thought about in your own space.
I have an idea.
Please, Lauren.
Hi, everybody. So a couple thoughts. I would say it reminds me of the thing that people say all the time about I think it was about like Henry Ford and building a faster horse versus like creating a car. So for me, instead of back to normal, it's kind of back to need. Like, what are the things that people really look to from the temple? And I would imagine it's like community, belonging, whatever those things are, figure out those few things. And then you need to marry those up with like what TBA stands for and like what the temple really is. Those things should come together. And to me, it would be evaluating how to deliver those things, trying to shed like, going to the building X number of times a week or whatever it is, like let's solve for the need. A lot of it is emotional needs, some of it's physical, whatever, but solving for those needs instead of just relying on the old solves.
Great, thank you, Lauren. Anyone else have a thought to share about how to cultivate this kind of thinking and nimbleness moving forward?
Well, I just think that we can't get away from we've gone online now, we've gone virtual. And so we need to, as we're shifting our thoughts to programming in the future, we just have to think about that and integrating that whenever possible. Or when it makes sense, or sometimes only doing virtual events. I think the podcast is a clear winner, things like that. So how to touch people in those soft touches while they're not on site.
Terrific, thank you.
I also think small groups are going to be a big thing because I'm not sure people are craving to be with massive groups. So I think really thinking about small group in-person programming, events, whatever, is going to be important.
Great. All really good ideas. And this is exactly the type of, looking at where we are, meeting the moment, and so to speak, and being intentional about how we move forward. So I encourage you to continue to put thoughts into the chat about this. I also want to offer up to you a framework to think about. And this might look familiar to people who have experience with design thinking or innovation, maybe wearing a different hat. But this framework for innovative thinking is something that I'd like to suggest tonight, and that I know that your fearless leaders will talk more about in the next session. But this framework suggests that we set the stage with a culture and mindset where we embrace the notion of perpetual beta, that we are going to keep innovating, that we're not looking to be static. You know, when you get your phone and they say this is operating system 1.0, well, you know that 2.0 is going to come, and you know that 3.0 is going to come, and you know that 4.0 is going to come. So what's built in is your expectation that things are going to continue to evolve and things are going to continue to change. And I think that mindset is really a mindset for this intentional framework that I'm suggesting, is that we get people used to the idea that things will continue to iterate and evolve, and that innovation is here to stay. And we embrace that. We embrace that as a community. Once we kind of have that mindset and we create that in the culture and we celebrate that, you know, just as you suggested, I think, Lauren, we identify kind of problems or specific problems or opportunities or needs, and we're very explicit about what those are. What are we looking to solve for? I think you said that nicely. Like, what's the issue or the challenge? What are we solving for? And then we want to survey. I think, you know, we want to survey, whether it's through conversation or through literally a survey, but we want to learn about our target audience. So if we're talking about religious school, like Becky brought up, we would learn about religious school families. If we were talking about you know, services, we would talk to the people that we know from the data who have been attending Shabbat services. So we would ask specific questions and learn about the targets from the issue that that pertains to. And then here's the opportunity for us to put on our creative thinking and to generate ideas. How can we approach this in a different way, whether it's small groups in person or integrating online as we continue, you know, to think about programming, or maybe it's something we haven't even thought about yet, but how can we get creative? And I think that's where the real opportunity lies here, to do things differently, creatively, and to look at how we can put different types, so we can associate different types of challenges that people have. So for example, just because it's very concrete, religious school, to pick on that for a minute, religious school was a challenge before for some people with transportation to get there, and meal times, and kids still need homework help, and competition with sports. So those were there before. Then add in the challenges that Becky spoke to about concerns and Zoom and this. Well, what are possible ways that we could solve some of those problems together? We could associate the different challenges, and we could generate creative solutions. So maybe that is that we are partnering with someone and serving pickup meals on your way out of religious school. Maybe that is transportation from various locations. Maybe that is, and again, these are all just for fun to consider, but these are ways to kind of creatively think about the challenges and associate them with other ideas. And so when you're generating, you want to allow a big brainstorm, and then you'll evaluate and pick the winning ideas based on some criteria, usually having to do with how many people, what are the resources, what is the, you know, what are the other implications. But I think if you can approach the system, this way of thinking about identifying and isolating the problems or opportunities, learning about the target audience, generating ideas through associating and networking with other congregations, with other nonprofits, with other people doing similar things to you. And then you can come up with criteria to pick something. And here's the key, not to say we're going to do it this way forever, but to try. And that's the key. How can we set this up as an experiment, as a prototype? So what we're really trying to do is not say this is the way we're going to do it forever from now on, but this is the way we're going to try to do it. And I think that, again, is a mindset shift. We're trying this. We're beta testing something, right? And how do we experiment and prototype? Many of you might be familiar with the book, some of you, The Lean Startup. And what it basically tells us is that you come up with a hypothesis. In my example, it would be, if we have transportation and we serve dinner, that we will get more people to sign up for in-person religious school when this is over. Let's experiment and try that. So we're going to offer it for 6 weeks in a pilot program. We set up and we're learning. We're learning to see satisfaction surveys, attendance surveys. Do people sign up more? And we then take all of that data, we experiment quickly, we measure and we learn, and then we make a decision. It works, it doesn't work, we see no change, people like it, they don't like it, and then we have a choice. We can either adopt it and say, this is what we're doing from now on, or we can iterate. We can say, well, we tried that. That was a good beta, but now we're on to the next example, right? The next thing to try, because that didn't really solve the problems that we thought we were going to be able to address, or it created other challenges, or people just weren't happy. But I think if we can get into this mindset and we can really adopt this idea of having a framework for thinking about the challenges that we face, then we're really set up to trust the process with great minds like everyone on here, and that we can really face anything together. And this is something that, you know, for those of you who are in the startup realm, for those of you who are familiar with design thinking in education, this is really the same framework that we just considered. So I want to pause there and ask if there are any questions about this framework before I talk about how this affects Temple leaders. Any questions? I see there's some conversation in the chat here. These are great suggestions, and we'll definitely capture these as well. The last thing I want to say is, hold on one second. Don't know why this keeps coming off. Okay, here we go. Well, let's see. Let's see if we can get it back. Can we get it? No. Yes, we can. Okay, good. Thank you. One thing that we can do is we can adopt or iterate if we validate our hypothesis, like I said, or we keep experimenting. So what does this mean for us? Well, here's the thing. What we can do is we can think about the implications here, how we can encourage innovative thinking moving forward, and how we can make it part or more part, as the rabbi said, of TBA's DNA. In subsequent sessions, this group is going to explore real challenges that TBA faces and ask you to use an innovative framework to generate ideas. We need your thinking to help TBA be relevant and successful, both when we return from this COVID period and in the future. And so I really hope that this is the beginning of officially moving from innovation by necessity to innovation by design, and that all of you are excited about the prospect of contributing to this process, because the more the merrier. We need the first person out there. We need that first follower, the second follower, and a movement to think in fresh and new ways, and to think in ways that will keep this beautiful, beautiful synagogue both vibrant and relevant now and in the future. So with that, I'm going to just take down my screen, see if anyone has any questions, and I would love to hear any thoughts from people before I turn it back over to our brave leaders. Thoughts, questions? Have you used the innovative framework or design thinking before? Does it sound good? Are you up for it? Can you approach challenges using these this module? Sarah's shaking her head.
Yeah, I run a product design, so this is basically what I do pretty much every day. And I will say, like, failing fast and failing often is really how you learn the best, I think.
It's cool to fail. It's cool to fail now. That's how we learn, right? That's great. Thanks, Sarah. We'll be calling on you, I'm sure.
Hey,
Other thoughts?
hi, Nanette. There's some questions in the chat that people are trying to understand, why are we talking about this now? That, I think it was kind of framed at the beginning, but they're coming up now. So I don't know if you want to address the why now. Becky
Yeah.
did and said, like, we were planning on doing this a long time ago, but so people are nervous about, like, why now?
So I think I can respond to that.
Great.
Is to say this, the desire to revamp our leadership development program, as I said in the chat, actually came over a year ago. Had nothing to do with COVID. But it came out of a desire to really think about what is it that our congregation needs from its leaders, and how then should we be training leaders in order to achieve that, rather than thinking like, okay, here you need these 5 leadership skills, and these are basic leadership skills that everybody needs. Really thinking about what is it that we need at TBA, and recognizing, as Rabbi started with, that we are a congregation who does like to innovate and is, good with taking chances on things that may or may not work. That if that is who we are, then that's how we should be training our leaders. And so that was, I think, the start of this. And I think that to really shift the way that we approach leadership development in its entirety, that it's not about a frontal training for you. I know tonight was a little more frontal. It's not about a frontal training for you. It's really about how do we bring people together who can really think in new ways and develop those skills in real time. And what COVID has provided is all sorts of challenges that are not unique to us. That is, challenges that are for societal challenges, that are across synagogue challenges, that are being dealt with all over, that require change. And that we as individuals and we collectively have changed, and therefore we need to be thinking intentionally about change management. And that's part of this idea, to address the sort of like, oh my God, are we losing members, and are we less engaged, and who's more or less engaged? I would say if you asked me to categorize, are we more engaged, less engaged, or the same? I would say that our congregation is more engaged now than it was. And I see Rabbi nodding his head as well. So this is not a program that is born out of crisis or fear or worry about our viability or any of those things. It is born out of vision, and Nikki and Carolyn's vision about what it is that emerging leaders need to be thinking about, and leaders need to be thinking about as we move into whatever stage we are in. And so that was the idea a year ago, and then we've sort of crafted more specifically based on where we are now in our world.
And just to piggyback, I think if you look at, and we didn't have time, nor did we facilitate, a lot of you don't know each other, right? And this is, some of you are seeing each other for the first time, and it's something for us to, and you're all great. This is a great assembly. But I wanted to say about this group is that there are, I would say, 3 generations, without using the traditional context, but 3 different sort of stages within temple life. And I think part of what this indicates is that, we went through a period, and part of it is still justified, of looking at micro communities in the congregation. We were thinking about how do we get this group for this and that group for that. And that was very helpful, I think, in terms of the ongoing sense of community that we have. But in a sense, looking at all of you from all the different places you're coming from, in a way, innovative thinking is, what are we doing for each other as this larger group? In other words, what is our destination? And in addition to individual, we're all driving different model cars, but we're all on the road, and we want to make that road safer and leading to more exciting places. And that does take a really different way of thinking. And I think that Nanette's suggesting that we need to use sets of tools that many of us have not. And like, I'm glad, Sarah, you said that this is part of design thinking and that's great, because it's good to have people who recognize this equipment and know how to utilize it most effectively. But, and I think, and then I'll stop, is, you know, Adam asked the question about what's the impetus? Are we in trouble? You know, and uh, I think actually, and this is totally ironic and not at all what I would have ever imagined saying, but I think we're in some fundamental ways in really good shape in terms of our leadership, in terms of a clarity of purpose. And I think because we're a larger group is tuned in, I think this is actually the time to dare to think about being on the cusp as opposed to playing catch up. It's much easier. You know, there are people that get on the bus and people that run along and kind of hold on for a few stops who can't get in because they weren't on time or because the bus is overcrowded. It's much better to be in the bus than to be catching up with it, you know. And my hope is that this effort that requires so many people will get us there, and just what, you know, because we're doing it as we move. So it's all about constructing a bigger bus as we drive. You know, it's counterintuitive, but this is the world we're in. Rather than waiting at the end of the road to help stragglers, I think we just got to make room and keep it rolling.
I'm wondering if anybody has any sort of reactions. I see Jody is kind of, you know, itching. And so Jody, we're going to start with you, but if anybody has any sort of comments and reactions to kind of where we are and where we're going. So Jody, you start.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. I'm Jody Steiner, member for, I was trying to remember exactly how long, but probably 12 years and off and on involved. So what I thought, this is a great conversation. I love the idea of innovation and by design and not necessity. How do we stay nimble? I actually, you know, in my humble opinion, TBA has, programming wise, has always had flexibility, trying new things. Let's try cooking. Let's try a Torah study. Let's have a book group. Let's do a trip. There's always been amazing programming. And what I think about is the problems and the opportunities. I think people are so isolated that the problem and opportunity is, how do we grow our community? How do we get to know each other better? We did that with some work around anti-racism work this fall. I got to meet people that I had been praying next to for a while, but I didn't know them. And now I actually can see them at the grocery store and say, hi, I'm Jody. You remember we met? I haven't done that in 10 years with TBA. I'll admit it, you know, we stay with the groups we know, you know. So I think about the creativity. How does the congregation get to know the kiddies and the families who are in the religious school? So the kiddies in the religious school go, oh, wow, there's this great person who plays the drums. There's that person who sings beautifully, whatever, so that there's more kind of cross-breeding. How do we connect? Even meetings like this, getting to know people. I know some names, but now I get to see some faces. Two more quickies. One is, I think that innovating by design, not by necessity. My gut says you need both. Life happens. We had to jump into anti-racism work by necessity. And now we did some really hard work together. And now it's like, oh, we did that by necessity. Do we want to do that by design? And what does that look like? Right? And the last is, I want to echo something. I think Robin brought it up in the chat. For me, like more creative ways to connect. So not just email, you know, let's like old-fashioned phone trees. I'll call 10 people, you call 10. We did that with the elders and the caring community. Fabulous. Sorry, I'm a sign language interpreter. I start signing. You know, I got to know several elders I would never have, and the virtual Shabbat. I love that people have been attending Zoom Shabbat services, including me. I've probably gone to more Shabbat services this year than I have in 10, except when my kids were being bar mitzvahed. I will admit it. And I've loved when I've been able to come. Enough out of me. Thank you.
I don't know if anybody else wants to share a reaction before we wrap up.
I'd like to make a comment. I think when we're in the sharing stage, I think it should be done intergenerational, having each meeting, your young parents, your middle-aged, the early grandmothers, the ones of us that are, the seniors of the temple. I think that that cross discussion has to be made to move forward. I mean, there's lots to do with all the younger families, and a lot of people, the younger members are friends outside of temple. That's really easy. Some of us that have been around for years and years and years that have no connection to that. I'm still interested in knowing what's happening in the school and what's doing, but I have, I come to temple, sometimes I feel like the new kid on the block, because there's a lot of us don't come anymore. There's not many of us left. Don't come because there's nothing there for us. Sometimes we feel left out. So I think in the discussions, that each discussion has the very age groups from the beginning, even maybe some of the older teens, the teens from time to time that, will become members because their parents were members and they grew up in the temple, but they have to have something to come back to other than, waiting till they're 30, maybe getting married. And then when it's time for their children to come be born by mitzvah, that's when they join the temple. Maybe there'd be a reason for them to come in between after the education is done, while they're in college and they're grad school. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the after. But it's the age group and the working together and having a reason to come, and have a reason, like on a Friday night, I stand there and I greet people at the front door, and I can ask about all their children and whatever. Fine, let them ask about me. What am I doing now that I'm retired? I just think it's very important to make a plan and to move forward as leadership with the different varying ages and intergeneration.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Bev, that's one of the reasons we're so thrilled with what our screens look like tonight, is that it's really well representative of our congregation. So we are really going to try to keep all of these meetings close to an hour. So I'm actually going to pass it off to Nikki to close us out on tonight's meeting.
Sure. Thank you, Becky. And thank you, Nanette, for walking us through that framework. And thank you, everyone here, for contributing your questions, your ideas, your comments. I think, what's very clear is that we do need a process for innovation and for leadership development. And the goal of tonight was really to set the stage and to really provide an overview and taste of the kinds of thinking and tools that we want to use when working to develop this program. When thinking about adult learning, in my background of medicine and education, there's a sort of meta-cognitive approach where the goal is to teach students content while also simultaneously practicing and teaching the how to think and how to solve problems and how to innovate using certain frameworks. And so this is the approach that we were really hoping to bring to the next generation of our leadership development and to bring to this Atideynu model. We wanted to make sure that it was an opportunity to simultaneously develop skills while also practicing those skills in real ways that will help solve current active problems that we need to deal with at TBA. So the upcoming sessions, there will be 4 of them, and they will be hands-on to tackle real challenges that we're facing. And it will be about learning and practicing this how to use framework and approach the innovative thinking, I think both by design and by necessity. And thank you so much, Nanette, for talking us through that approach. I think that clearly this year we've learned the value and necessity in innovation, problem solving, adapting to change. So we really hope that this will be a fun and collaborative way for us to learn new valuable skills together, to get to know each other better, to get to know our TBA community better, and to work together to solve problems. So I guess if you're sitting here wondering if you are the right person for this program, the answer is yes. We need people with diverse strengths. We need people with different interests and different perspectives. We need people who have had a wealth of experience and history at TBA. And we also need the people who have fresh eyes, who are newer to the congregation or newer to TBA. We really need people who like to learn and think critically, who want to help problem solve, and who are open-minded and willing to go about this innovative process with us. So we invite you to sign up for the upcoming series of 4 workshops. We do ask that you make a commitment to the group to attend all 4 of them. They're going to be sequential and build on each other. So it's really not meant to be a sort of pick one or that type of thing. We really hope that you'll commit to the 4 sessions. It's going to be on Wednesdays at 7:30 p.m. for about an hour. February 10th, I'm looking here, 24th, 17th, and 31st. And I think Becky is putting the link to sign up, and she'll also send this out to everybody. If you're not sure and you want to learn more, or you have questions about the process, please reach out to us. We can talk you through it. And again, thank you to Rabbi and Becky and Nanette and Carol for helping Carolyn and I try to put this Atideynu program together. And thank you all for joining tonight.